Okay. Good vach, everybody. Good vach.
Good vach.
Good vach.
I'd like to dedicate our story tonight to
Good vach.
Good vach. Tonight's the upshenish of my third cousin, Menachem Mendel ben Rabbi Elzeh Wolf. Rashbatz for him. Auswachsen, torah chub meistem tevim, chassidus shmayim v'lamden. And as Rebbe would often wish people, even greater chassid than his father, which is not such a easy feat. Anyways, the story we began about the Rashbatz, just to recap. Okay, I'll say his mother's name as well. Usually by bracha you say the father's name. His mother's name is Menachem Mendel ben Esther Yechevet. Discussed for him I started this story 2 weeks ago about Rabbi Shmuel Betzalel Sheftel. It's a bit of a controversial story, and I did get some negative feedback. People were asking me why am I sharing the story, which seems to violate a little bit of the Chafetz Chaim principle. It doesn't reflect so well on those who oppose chassidus. And someone
Rabbi.
Was like, hold on. We'll talk later. Let me share this first. So I just want to share that, first of all, the Rav Hirsch that I was mentioning in the story of Hershela was not the famous Rav Hirsch, who wrote a commentary in the Chumash and was a very prominent rabbi in Germany who caused many thousands of people to do tshuva. I even heard that the Rebbe Cashapp said about Rav Hirsch that if he would have been in Germany at the same time, he would have done the same as Rav Hirsch. That's what I heard. Anyways, but the story is an important one to share, even though I'm not saying a scary part, Rosie. Don't worry, you can open up your ears. There is a scary part tonight, but anyways, this story is an important story to share because it really expresses the sacrifice that Chassidim had to learn Tanya, to learn chassidus, and it gives us a little bit of an insight of how valuable chassidus is and what kind of sacrifice people made to be able to learn chassidus, and we shouldn't take it for granted, and we should really dedicate ourselves to this beautiful gift that Hashem has given our generation. So with no further ado, continuing on where we were up to in the story. Reb Shmuel Betzalel Sheftel, as I mentioned last time, was a Melamed. He was a teacher of the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab, and the Frierdiker Rebbe, and also he was a mashpia. He was a mentor in the yeshiva of Tomchei Tmimim in Lubavitch. And in where we got up to in the story was how he was being raised by his mother and by his stepfather, who was his uncle, who had married his mother. And he had become very curious about the ways of the Chassidim, and he noticed a lot of incredible character traits in the Chassidim, and therefore he wanted to hang out with them and learn from them. But he was frightened because at that time there was such an opposition to Chassidim that it was actually dangerous. It was literally dangerous to hang around Chassidim, as you shall see in the story how dangerous it was. But he really felt that this was something that really was worth risking his life for, because he felt that there's something really special about it. And he managed to find a chassid whose name was Rabbi Moshe, one of the employees of Rabbi the Tailor, which is another time we'll talk maybe about Rabbi the Tailor, a story in himself. So he learned from Rabbi Moshe about the history of the Chassidim, and he asked Rabbi Moshe if, in addition to telling him about the learning with him just himself, he wanted to experience the learning of the Chassidim as a group. The Chassidim would meet together 3 times a week to study Gemara in depth. And Rabbi Shmuel Betzalel later recounted that although he was a very gifted person, and he learned with the rabbi of the town, dedicated himself for every day studying with him for many hours. But he said, had he not seen it himself, he would never have believed the incredible depth with which the Chassidim studied the Gemara. He said, if I had not seen it with my eyes and heard it with my ears, I could not have imagined the incredible depth that they studied the Gemara. But besides the Gemara, they also studied together Tanya. And he went to their Beis Medrash and he sat together with Rabbi Moshe, and Rabbi Moshe would sit next to him, explain to him anything that he'd understand of the Tanya. He would explain it to him, and he really enjoyed studying the Tanya, and he would talk over with Rabbi Moshe afterwards, and he would explain it to him. Rabbi Bezalel later recounted when he was a senior dean, a senior mashpia, a mentor in the city of Lubavitch. He says, "You don't know how much we appreciated hearing things from the elder Hasidim." He said, "When I would hear one thing from Moshe, I would spend 6 hours to study it over. I would repeat it in my mind again and again, many, many times until I fully understood it." In the language, in the Hasidic lexicon, he used to say to the young students, he used to say, "You guys are like fattened calves who don't know what you're being given." I would hear one teaching from Moshe, and I would go over and over it again and again for many hours. 6 hours, I would study things over. I trained my mind to repeat things over again and again until I was able to concentrate on one concept for 3 hours straight. For 3 hours straight, it was able just to think. Anyways, so he's going to this Bais Medrash, he's learning, and David is, if you're able to put your camera on, that would be great, because I'd like to see your face. Anyways, he used to go to the Bais Medrash, I used to learn with the Chassidim, and he really loved it. One day, he's learning this passage in Tanya. It was actually chapter 12 in Tanya, the passage which talks about how if somebody wrongs you, the Alter Rebbe says, the Zohar says how we shall learn from Yosef and his brothers, and if its slightest feeling of anger or animosity or hatred comes in your mind, the Alter Rebbe says what you should do is you should push it out of your mind with both hands, and you should treat the person that you're angry with love and respect. Do the exact opposite of what he did to you. Just like Yosef was kind to his brothers who hurt him, so too should a Jew learn from Yosef, do exactly the same thing. Now, although the author officially of this story in the Hatamim doesn't say the author is, it's pretty clear from various sources that this was actually the previous Rebbe wrote the story. He doesn't explain what was significant about this chapter of Tanya being taught at this juncture of the story, which you'll see, which is very significant. But it makes me think that perhaps this was a message for him in his life, to how he should look at all the torment that he experienced at the hands of the detractors of the Chassidim. Anyways, he was having a hard time understanding this concept. And he told Rabbi Moshe, it's hard for him. What should he do? Rabbi Moshe said to him, take the Tanya home, take it with you, and review it. And he reviewed it again. And this became a recurring thing. He would take the Tanya with him, a small volume of Tanya that he had. He would take it with him. And he would sit at night in the synagogue and he would review it again and again. And one night, he's reviewing this passage, chapter 12 in Tanya. And he's going over it again. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. He's going over and he's saying it out loud. And someone sees how he's studying so beautifully in such a melodious tune. Someone walks into the synagogue and he sits down next to him, just listening to how he's learning. He loves, just enjoying the guys. It's such a beautiful thing. Rashbatz later recounted, he said that the original Misnagdim, those original detractors of the Chassidim, they actually were very refined individuals, and they actually suspected the Chassidim of going against the Torah. But he said that the subsequent generation that he lived in, they had no idea who the Chassidim were. They didn't really know anything about the Chassidim, and they just were following blindly the hatred that they were given as children, and they were attacking the Chassidim without really making any investigation. They really didn't know at all what the Chassidim were doing at all. Anyways, this guy's listening to him, and Rashbatz doesn't notice him because he's so engrossed in his studies. And then, while he's listening, the guy approaches him, and he's sitting next to him. Rashbatz looks up, and he sees the guy's looking at him. And he got very frightened. He goes, oi, 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 and he took the Tanya and he put it in his pocket. And the man realized something's unusual over here. So he says, what's wrong? I am enjoying listening to you. This is really, really nice. What are you learning? Rashbatz thought that the man really was playing around with him, that he knew what he was studying, and he got frightened, and the man realized that something's wrong over here. And he went over to Rashbatz and he wrestled with him until he pulled the book out of his pocket, and he opened it up, and he didn't know what this book was until he got to the word Tzadikim Beinim Rishayim, which he knew that was something that the Kat studied. This was something that the sect, as the Misnagdim, the detractors of Chassidim would call the Chassidim at the time, they called them the Kat. They called them the heretics. And so he couldn't believe it. Here is this boy who was so gifted. And that morning, right by the earliest minyan, he went over to Reb Hershela, and he told Reb Hershela what he had discovered. This boy is studying the teachings of the Kat. He showed him the Tanya. And Reb Hershela says, God has given you a great schus. The man said, yes, you're studying the book, and with the hell I did for the sake of God. I fought and I wrestled with him, and I got the book out of his hands. Herschel says, yes, God has given you a great merit. You need to go call his stepfather, his uncle, right away, so I should tell him what's going on. The uncle comes to Herschel, and he tells his uncle, look who you're raising, look what he's doing. This boy that you're raising in your home, look what's happening to him. He's going to the ways of heresy. He's going against the Torah. Meanwhile, Rabbi Moshe Bezalel, he went into the rafters, into the roof of the synagogue. There was like a little hole over there. I was able to observe everything that's going on in the synagogue. And he saw the first minyan had prayed and left. And he decided that this would be forgotten. Like the guy had noticed him, but nothing's going to happen. He'll be okay. He didn't realize what was going on. He went down in the synagogue and he prayed, and then he went home. When he came home, his uncle greeted him at the house. As soon as he stepped in the door of the house, he had a board, and he hit him in the forehead with the board very hard. And he started, after he hit him with the board, and he started beating him with his hands. He beat him so much until he fainted. And his mother was so frightened, she started screaming, and he awoke because he heard his mother's screams. But his step kept on beating him. And he told his wife, you know why you're a woman and you have mercy, but you don't know what you're doing. This boy is going in the path of heresy. Wouldn't you rather that he died as a kosher Jew before he leaves Judaism, rejects Judaism? He keeps on beating him. And finally he stops beating him. And it takes a couple of days for him to recover from this beating. And after a few days pass, and he returns to his strength, he goes back to the synagogue as he always would study Torah, and he goes back to study with Rav Hershel. But instead of studying with Rav Hershel the regular subjects, Rav Hershel starts talking to him about his great sin. And he says to him, will you stop your ways? Will you go back to the Chassidim? And Rav Moshe Bezalel started explaining to the rabbi who the Chassidim are and what they're doing. And the rabbi Rabbi Hershel saw that Rav Moshe Bezalel knew a lot better about the Chassidim than he did. And he couldn't respond to Rav Moshe Bezalel's arguments because Rav Moshe Bezalel knew a lot more. And he realized that he was, from the perspective of the rabbi, that he was caught by the Kat. He was caught by this group, and he wouldn't be able to get him out of their clutches. And he told this to the uncle, the stepfather, Moshe Bezalel, that this guy he's stuck. I can't convince him otherwise. He's stuck. He's not going to go back to. He's not leaving the Chassidim. I can't convince him otherwise. From that day, the uncle decided he's not going to keep Moshe Bezalel in his house. He doesn't want to keep this apikoros, this heretic in his house. And the rabbi told everyone in the synagogue how this boy has been captured by the Kat, and he told everyone that they should stay away from him. And although he was allowed to stay in the synagogue and study, but everyone, first of all, he was very hungry because he no food anymore from his home. He couldn't go home. But besides being hungry, people also would constantly ridicule him. They would call him, you're a heretic, you're not bikoros, you're a min, all kinds of derogatory terms, and they really caused him pain. Doesn't say exactly what they did, doesn't say if they slapped him or beat him, but they spoke in derogatory way to him all the time. And his mother would bring him a dry bread, so he had something to eat. And every day he had this dry bread that she would bring him, including Shabbos. She brought him this dry bread. And Shabbos morning, after the prayers are over, he walks out of the town, and he turns to God. He starts crying to God. He says, God, you're the father of orphans. Rabbi Moshe Levin, as I mentioned last time, he lost his father at a young age. He says, God, you're the father of orphans. I just want to go in your path, in the path of truth, in your path of God. I want to go in your way. If the path of Misnagdim is the correct path, the path of the tractors of Chassidim is the correct path, I'll go in that way. If the path of the Chassidim is the correct path, I'll go in that way. Show me a sign which path I should go to. Which path is the correct path? I don't know. God, you show me a sign. And he says to God, similar to the way that Eliezer said to God, may the first person I meet be the wife of Yitzchak, wife of my servant Avram. So too the Rashbatz said to God, God, may the first person I meet be the one that I'm supposed to follow in their path. And he finishes his prayer and he starts walking back to town, and from a great distance he sees Rabbi Hershela and two of the Misnagdim. And he was very distraught because in his heart he had felt that he should go in the path of the Chassidim. But he said this to God and he was very distraught, but he's hoping maybe the Chassidim will come first. It's still time, it's still a great distance till he got up to Rabbi Hershela. Maybe one of the Chassidim will come. And sure enough, two Chassidim come out of their synagogue. Oh, the Chassidim are coming. But then they took off and they went down a side route and they left the road. And he's upset. He's going to meet Rabbi Hershela, but he's still a chance. He might meet someone else. He starts walking, and sure enough, two Chassidim come out of the Chassidic Bais Medrash, and one of them was actually this Rabbi Moshe who had taught him, and everyone in town was talking about this boy who was so gifted and how the Rabbi Hershela had spent so much time with him, and he was captured by the cat, and how his uncle had kicked him out of the house, and the whole town was talking about him. And you could see the Chassidim, Rabbi Moshe and the other Chassidim were talking about him too, and they saw him from a distance. They didn't know everything that was going on with him. They noticed that he had stopped coming, so they thought that maybe he had stopped coming because he didn't consider the study that he was getting valuable. So they screamed out to him, "Hey, Rabbi Bezalel, what's going on with you? If all the wisdom in the world we poured onto you, you're still not going to realize what the truth is." Something like that. And Rabbi Bezalel, as a response, he told them everything that happened to him. And even though Rabbi Moshe was very poor, and by the standards of living at that time, very poor means that, really poor, like to, for food. But still, Rabbi Moshe took him to his house, and he fed him, and he stayed in Rabbi Moshe's house. And Rabbi Moshe would teach him, and he recalled later in life how special those days are with Rabbi Moshe. One day, he happened to meet Rabbi Hershela, and Rabbi Hershela asked him if he repented his ways. And instead of responding to that, he started asking Rabbi Hershela a question about a subject matter that they had learned together. He asked him a very strong question about something they had studied together. And Rabbi Hershela didn't know the answer, so he started saying his own answer. And Rabbi Hershela was really, really impressed. He says, I don't know what's going on with you, but your Torah study has certainly taken an ascent. You're certainly elevated in your level of Torah study. That's incredible, the learning that you're doing. And while they're talking, Rabbi Bezalel feels a blow to his head, which caused his face to snap back and forth, that he turned his left to the left, and it was such a strong blow, it made his head turn to left and right and knocked his hat off. And as he's going to pick up his hat, blood is flowing from his mouth and from his nose, and he gets hit again and again. These misnagdim had come and started beating him, and their Hershela and the other more great Torah scholars tried to stop them, but they kept on beating him. And they would have killed him, but Rabbi Hershela summoned the Chassidim, and all the Chassidim came together to defend him from these blows, and they were able to protect him. But he had passed out, and he only awoke 3 weeks later in the synagogue of the Chassidim, and a doctor had examined him and discovered that he had pneumonia and his brain was swelling. And he was lying there for days, unconscious, mouth was open with a great fever, and he was really, really, he wasn't well. But finally, they nursed him back to health. And the Chassidim were afraid to let him go outside, lest he be beaten up again. And so from this summertime, when he had started to stay there until the month of Shvat, he stayed there, and the Chassidim taught him Gemara and Chassidus. And that's the part that we will share for tonight. God willing, we'll continue the story, Mitzvah Hashem, next week, Mitzvah Hashem. Any questions or comments before we, Yitzchak, want to say something before we stop for tonight?
Cliffhanger, eh?
Baruch ben Moshe Akain. My daughter told you to stop by today. Thanks for stopping by. God willing, we'll continue the story and Mitzvah next week. Have good vach, Shoshana. Good vach, Baruch. Good vach, Beryl. Good
Rabbi.
Yes, not yes, Yitzchak.
I really enjoy your Malava Malka programs.
Thank you.
I enjoy everything you do. You're a great man.
Thank you for the compliment.
You deserve it.
Thank you. Good vach, Yitzchak. Good vach.
What I want to tell you, I would love to tell you, not in public.
Okay, we'll talk later then.
I'll give you a call on your number later.